Hey there, friends and family. So, it's time for another episode of Storytime with Stephen. Now today, we're going to be reading an article from Britannica titled Dormancy in Cold-Blooded Vertebrates. So, this is really important as we discussed last week regarding hibernation, formerly known as brumation in reptiles. And this article is going to say brumation because up until recently, that was the accepted term. And according to many, it still is the accepted term. So I'm going to read this article and I'll post a link in the description. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can learn more about frogs and fishes. But I'd hope you'd read along with me while we discuss reptiles. It's pretty interesting stuff. Here we go. Because reptiles depend on external sources of heat to keep warm, they survive during periods of low temperature by seeking a place where the temperature will not fall below freezing, except temporarily. The commonest niche for reptilian dormancy is almost always found underground at a depth dependent on the thermal conductivity of the soil relative to the minimum temperature reached. Now what that means, they need to go to a place where it's still somewhat warm in the soil. So it can't be too cold. This factor alone can control the distribution of reptiles. None can survive in the Arctic or Antarctic, in places in which the subsoil is permanently frozen, and relatively few can exist in areas near these regions, even if suitable sites for dormancy were available, because the short summers would prevent the completion of life cycles. Although the distribution of snakes at high latitudes or altitudes is limited, the adder has been found at 10,000 feet in the Swiss Alps and as far north as the Arctic Circle. The Himalayan pit viper has been found at an altitude of 5,000 meters or 16,000 feet. Winter dormancy in reptiles, which is also called brumation, is akin to hibernation in mammals. Instead of experiencing long, sustained periods of inactivity, brumating reptiles stir occasionally to drink water. However, they may go without food for several months. Dormancy in reptiles may display a circadian rhythm, a seasonal one, or both. It is a state of torpor directly induced by low temperature. When the adder, for example, experiences temperatures of about 8 to 10 degrees Celsius or 46 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, it begins to search out suitable niches in which to rest. Its dormancy ends on the first sunny days after the maximum temperature has reached 7.5 degrees Celsius, 45.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Because these conditions vary, the adder's period of dormancy extends from 275 days in Northern Europe to 105 days in Southern Europe, and is about 2 weeks in the United Kingdom, where the Gulf Stream provides warmth. So read that again. The adder's period of dormancy, that's one species, extends from 275 days in Northern Europe to 105 days in Southern Europe, and is about 2 weeks in the United Kingdom. So one snake species has a dormancy period that ranges between 275 days and 2 weeks. It's a pretty substantial difference. It's also a great reason to understand the natural history and the locality of your snakes. Reptiles also normally become dormant during the hottest parts of summer, but the physiology of summer dormancy is quite different from that of winter. As already mentioned, winter dormancy is a state of torpor, induced by a low temperature that becomes more pronounced as the temperature falls. There is, however, a wide range between the animal's normal, active temperature and the lowest temperature at which it can exist. At high temperatures, on the other hand, there is a much narrower range between the ectothermic temperature, or normal temperature, and temperatures that cause death. In other words, reptiles can tolerate colder temperatures much better than they can tolerate higher ones. Anyone who's ever shipped reptiles will tell you that it's much easier to ship during the fall and early spring than in the middle of summer. And this is a big reason. If you get your snake stuck on an airplane or the back of a FedEx truck when it's 115 degrees outside, doesn't matter what you put in that box to insulate it, you're probably going to end up with a dead snake. Desert reptiles in particular exhibit such temperature responses daily. For this reason, during hot weather, they must seek refuge underground or in cool, shady places. When they remain physiologically active but must forego all normal activity because of the restricted nature of the cooler niche. Desert reptiles in particular exhibit such temperature responses daily. This is really important to understand because when you have a snake like a rosy boa that's a desert reptile, in nature, they're going to be nocturnal during most of the summertime. But during spring and winter, they may show activity during the day, become more crepuscular as well. So it's important to understand just how the temperatures work. So if you look at the weather apps and see that it's 104 degrees in San Bernardino and think that it's okay to put your rosy boa in a 104 degree enclosure, just know that it has no place to escape. When it's 104 degrees in those mountains, that snake either burrows under the ground or is stuck between 15,000 granite rock where it's deep under and it's only about 80 degrees or 65 degrees. So keep that in mind, that the temperature outside can greatly affect the where your snake is going to be active. During its dormancy, the amount of water needed by a reptile is less than that at other times and is normally supplied by water produced from the metabolism of the animal's own stored food reserves, particularly fat. In areas in which alternating wet and dry seasons occur, reptiles maintain a longer period of dormancy during the dry season. This behavior may be related more to the lack of available water than to temperature, because in such areas the onset of the seasonal monsoons elicits a period of increased reptile activity. Because there is only a limited number of suitable sites available for dormancy, several snakes, usually of the same species, may be found in each niche. As many as 100 or more snakes have been taken from one winter den. Occasionally, lizards and toads may also be found in the same den, but stories of snakes that shared denning sites with small birds and mammals have been difficult to substantiate. It is much more unusual to find that the entry of snakes into the burrow of a prairie dog or some other warm-blooded animal is followed by the evacuation of the original occupant. Then it goes on to study the effects of latitude, meaning where it is in the globe, how closer to the Arctic Circle or below the equator, down to the lower circle. Now, if you have snakes in captivity, you have to understand where they're from, okay, and reptiles. Because if they're from North America or the southern areas of South America, the Cape of Africa and South America, European reptiles, these animals are going to go through summers and winters. If you have what I have in these enclosures here, rainbow boas, Brazilian rainbow boas from the Amazon, and up there I have a reticulated python from Indonesia that is going to be also really near the equator, they're not going to go through these highs and low temperature ranges. So to them, I would cycle food availability and dry and wet. So I'd change the humidity on them for their seasons. Despite the fact that they almost always maintain a 100% humidity in their native range. But that's another study for another time. Hope you enjoyed reading a little bit on this. This is just one of the small articles that you could read to just kind of get a better understanding of your snakes. And I hope you enjoyed spending a little time with me reading about dormancy in reptiles. Again, there's 250 million articles and books out there that you can read. And I hope if you start with this one, that you look for more like it and continue this research on your own, because there is a wealth of information out there. And if you're like me, I've only just cracked the surface of the, again, treasure trove of information that's out there to learn more about reptiles. That's it for Storytime with Steven. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed learning something.